Hello, my name is Matt, and welcome to My Hidden Nerdy Side. And today we're starting a brand new video series I call Let's Build a Villain, where we're going to go over the steps I take whenever I craft a villain for my D&D campaigns. Then we'll create a villain using these steps and go over ways you can implement them in your home games. As you can see by the title, we're going to be creating a sympathetic necromancer. A necromancer the party can sympathize with, and who also sympathizes with the party and understands why they need to stop him. He's actually more of an antagonist than a villain, but we'll get into that later. Traditionally, necromancers are evil wizards who use their powers to raise the dead to fight their battles so they can obtain more power, wealth, or whatever else they're after. But one way to create an interesting character is to take a common trope and flip it on its head. When people are expecting one thing and get something else, it's always going to make them at least a little curious. So look at that, a bonus tip before we even get into the meat of the video. So once you have your basic seed of an idea, how do we take that and make it into a compelling villain? The 5 steps I go through are: who are they? What is their motivation? How does their motivation create conflict with the party? What are their abilities? And finally, when and where are they going into the story? This is also the order I usually answer these questions in. Of course, once you better answer these questions, you can go back and alter things. But I find this order works best since each question feeds off the one before it. Let's start with who they are. This is their basic info: name, race, personality, etc. I tend to start off with who they are personality-wise before going over their physical description and name, since their personality often gives me ideas of what to name them or how they should look. Now, if we want to create a sympathetic necromancer, this guy needs to have magical abilities, has to have a certain level of empathy to sympathize with the player's desires, and needs to have sympathetic qualities the players can get behind. So here is Ciltrian Faley, a half-elf tailor who used to run a shop with his wife, Natalia. And they are just your classic working-class family trying to get by. He is kind, caring, hardworking, and basically the best father and husband you could ask for. Buying surprise flowers for Natalia, helping his daughter with her homework, you know, all that good stuff. Okay, so we've set up he's a pretty stand-up guy that even your most ridiculous players would have a hard time hating. But if your party doesn't have a problem with Ciltrian, and if he has no reason to learn necromancy, then he will be a pretty piss-poor antagonist. So, he needs a motivation. I personally believe one of, if not the best way to prep your adventures is to know the motivations of your key players above all else. That way, when your party does things that lead them to avoiding certain encounters or other stuff you had planned, you know exactly how the key players would adapt to those situations and can move them around accordingly. Now, what would motivate our loving family man to learn the dark arts of necromancy? I mean, he obviously has no desire to raise an army to topple kingdoms. Well, what is necromancy? It's the practice of magic involving communication or control over the dead. So, what's the biggest reason a loving husband and father would learn such magic? Well, what if his wife had died? A tragic illness took the life of his partner far too soon, and because Ciltrian loves her beyond words and also wants his daughter to have the perfect life, he started visiting mage colleges and looked all over the world trying to find a way to bring her back. After searching far and wide, and after many people turned him away saying it was either impossible or offensive to the gods, a woman named Tilda, who also happened to be a master cleric, told him about a spell only immensely talented clerics could ever learn. A spell not even Tilda could perform. The resurrection spell. And so Ciltrian decided to do whatever it takes to learn it. So this is an incredibly strong motivation for any character to have. However, just because your villain has a strong motivation, that doesn't necessarily make them good, because that motivation needs to directly conflict with the party's goals. So, how do we make Ciltrian's motivation clash with what the party wants? Because as it stands, unless the party doesn't want some nice random guy to revive his wife for some weird reason, there won't be any conflict. So, how do we make Ciltrian drift to the dark side? Well, What if he was a once-in-a-lifetime necromancy prodigy? After only a year of training, he not only mastered everything Tilda taught him, but surpassed her immensely. To him, raising the dead and manipulating their corpses was as simple as riding a bike. He then spent some time gathering the diamonds necessary to finally perform the spell to bring his wife back and make his family whole again. And when he cast the spell, what if it didn't work? After learning more than Tilda ever thought possible, after becoming the most talented necromancer to possibly ever live, after finding all the material components and doing everything right, nothing happened. His wife remained dead. Maybe Ciltrian snaps. Maybe he gets angry with his master and goes to continue his search to find a way to revive his wife, and can't accept the results of his attempt at resurrection. This angry, desperate, and vulnerable man, who people started spreading stories about, was finally approached by someone who had heard these stories. And this person is your campaign's big bad evil guy. Your campaign's big bad promises Ciltrian that he can give him the power necessary to revive his wife if Ciltrian can promise to serve him loyally. And so Ciltrian goes on doing the big bad's bidding, and will then, of course, end up conflicting with your party as a result. Now, this alone could work if you really played up Ciltrian's desperation to bring his wife back for his daughters and his own sake. But to me, that seemed like too much of a drastic personality shift. I mean, if Ciltrian really was a stand-up guy, would he go around committing heinous acts just for the chance of bringing his wife back? I didn't see it as something he would do. Also, I did not think that would be enough for the party to truly 100% sympathize with him. So I took it a step further. After Ciltrian went on a few jobs for the Big Bad, he realized just how evil the Big Bad was and discovered more about him and what he could do. And so, Ciltrian decided he did not want to be some evil puppet. And later on, he also discovered an awful truth. After hearing tales of the incredibly talented necromancer and what he was able to achieve, the Big Bad placed a curse on Ciltrian's wife, which would prevent her revivification, leading to Ciltrian's attempts failing. At which point, the Big Bad would take advantage of the situation and tell Ciltrian he knows how to revive her, since he does know how, since he's the sole reason Ciltrian can't. After discovering this, Ciltrian of course wanted to strike him down and free his wife. However, after getting a sense that Ciltrian was going to quit, the Big Bad kidnapped Ciltrian's daughter. So not only is the Big Bad holding the soul of his wife hostage, he is also keeping his living daughter as prisoner, threatening to kill her if Ciltrian doesn't continue his work. Now that's a strong motivation to keep Ciltrian actively working against the party, while still making the party ultimately sympathize with him because, well, who can blame a father for doing anything for his daughter's safety? Okay, so now comes the spicy part of designing any villain, their stats and abilities. Now, I love it when a villain's actions and abilities reflect who they are and what they've been through. So since he's supposedly the most talented necromancer alive, what on-theme stuff can we give him to make combat really engaging? I'll toss his stats and abilities up on screen and give more explanation when necessary. But since he's a powerful necromancer, I gave him a decent AC and HP, along with some appropriate saving throws, an 18 spell DC, and plus 11 to spell attacks. As he is, I recommend tossing him at parties level 8 to 12, depending on how difficult you want to make the encounter. I also gave him magic resistance to make him extra scary, and what every boss creature needs, legendary actions. I went with Chill Touch, Toll the Dead, and a first level command spell. Chill Touch is one of my favorite legendary actions because it prevents healing. Toll the Dead is for some extra damage, and Command is for causing some extra fun shenanigans with your players, and is on theme for a necromancer who commands armies of dead creatures. I also gave him a cool homebrew necromancy reaction called Body Block, which allows him to move a creature whose corpse he's manipulating in the way of oncoming attacks. He can cast any legendary action as an action, along with some spells I selected that I felt were appropriate. On top of that, he can also cast Hail of Bones 3 times per day, which is essentially just animate objects, but it only works on bones and other dead material. And I mean, come on, how fun is it going to be to just huck body parts at your players? Slap them in the face with a cut off hand, or kick them in the nuts with a severed leg. It's all great fun. Now, this is all awesome, but there's one thing obviously missing. I mean, he's a necromancer. So where is his army of corpses? Well, when the initiative order hits 20, essentially acting as a lair action without a lair, Ciltrian can use his ability Animate Army. With a flick of his wrist, Ciltrian can instantaneously animate every dead creature within 120 feet of him. Not only can he animate them, but he can also break apart and assemble their body up to 60 feet from where they were animated, and even combine the corpses together to create even stronger creatures. This ability alone turns Ciltrian from a worthy foe to the most badass necromancer on the planet. And it makes sense given at this point, he has been built up to be an unparalleled talent when it comes to necromancy. And if you're wondering if he has to concentrate on this ability, the answer is hell no. This allows Ciltrian to basically make an army whenever he needs to with a snap of his fingers, meaning he will always be an intimidating foe so long as there are corpses nearby. Now you might be thinking, Matt, isn't this ability too broken? And the answer is, yeah, kinda. But that's okay, because your big villains are allowed to be busted. So long as when you throw him against your party, the situation is still winnable, give him whatever you want. Just don't go giving this ability to your players unless you want combat to be an absolute slog. When he animates corpses, they have the skeleton stat block, and then I've provided 2 modified creations up on screen for when he combines multiple skeletons together. But with the combination of dead bodies to block projectiles, body parts flying at my party, and skeletons turning into different creatures to chop them up, my party had an absolute blast. When an enemy has an ability as powerful as this one, not only does it give the dungeon master a lot of freedom, but it also gives your party a clear goal. Ignore all the ads and take the necromancer down. Because once the party sees Ciltrian use this ability to bring the skeletons that they just destroyed back to life, they'll quickly understand the situation. So, all that's left is to figure out where to put him. Now, given his particular set of abilities, you're going to get the most out of him by putting him in a graveyard, battlefield, or wherever there are corpses. At the same time, with a potentially lovable antagonist whose only real crime is loving his family too much, I'd recommend giving your parties opportunities to learn more about our dear Ciltrian so it's easier for them to sympathize with him later. What I did was have the party witness him, along with his other BBEG friends, as they kidnapped someone, which pretty much started my whole campaign. I told the party they noticed he was wearing an unusual looking pin on his cloak. They asked around and it led them to a mage college, which then led them to Ciltrian's master, who told them about Ciltrian's incredible gifts and how Ciltrian was trying to resurrect his wife, and then she never saw him or his daughter ever again. And then later on, they ran into Ciltrian on an island where an old famous pirate and his crew died hundreds of years ago fighting one of the largest giants the world has ever seen. Ciltrian then, of course, animated the bodies of those dead legendary pirates and the 50-foot tall giant because, I mean, you gotta at that point. However, because Ciltrian hated hurting people, he decided he would test the party to see how strong they were. If the party knocked Ciltrian down to 40 hit points, he would stop the fight and ask the party for a favor. Ciltrian had a magical marking on his hand that allowed the main big bad to track him wherever he went. And if Ciltrian were to come within 10 kilometers of his daughter, the big bad would kill her. He will tell them if they can go save his daughter, he will have no more reason for serving the main big bad, and will even tell the party everything he knows. One thing to keep in mind if you end up making Ciltrian their ally. Have a reason in your back pocket as to why he can't travel with them, because giving your players that broken of an ally will not only make encounters too simple, but will also make them feel weak and suck the fun out of the game. My solution was, since the magical marking on Ciltrian's hand tracked wherever he went, it would be detrimental for him to travel with the party. So, there you go. One sympathetic necromancer for you to toss into your games. How would you take Ciltrian and spice him up? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to like, subscribe, and share this video around. If there are any other topics you would like me to cover, just let me know in the comment section below. Thanks for watching and indulging my hidden nerdy side.